Hello, we're Natalie and Abby, and you are listening to The Sensational Life with Bibic.
Join us to explore the many layers of life through unique and inspiring topics each week. Whether you're looking to better support yourself or others, we're here to provide insights, practical tips, and meaningful conversations.
Bibic is a national charity dedicated to empowering children and young adults with brain injuries, disabilities, and neurological or developmental challenges. We're both part of a fantastic team of developmental therapists. While our title might sound a bit fancy, it really just means that we're here to support children, young adults, and families with helpful strategies for any challenges that they encounter.
There may be times we cover some difficult topics during this podcast, but we will always give you prior warning of this. We'll have some wonderful guest speakers joining us, and we can't wait to hear from you with all your questions and your own stories. Together, we can create a more inclusive and understanding world, one episode at a time.
Hello, welcome back to The Sensational Life with Bibic. We are going to be talking a little bit today about organisation. And we've actually got a guest speaker coming in today. We've got our Head of Therapy and Business Development, Chelsea, coming in. She's spent many years working as a therapist in Bibic, so she's going to come in and give us our top tips about organisation and things like that.
We've also got a couple of questions to get started on, so we thought we'd do a little bit of question time to start with before we get started on organisation. So one of the questions we've been asked is, why does my child seek out screen time so much? So I think we did, didn't we, Abby? We touched on this last episode in terms of potentially the reason for sort of seeking out screen time may be sort of from an executive functioning point of view, in terms of sort of games and things like that, really being planned for children. They know what they're expected, they know what's sort of coming. Yes, there's obviously those difficult elements of games when they get tricky bits, but you said about they've always got those little hints and tips at the bottom.
Yeah, there's always a little person they can go to or like a little help button. So it's all there and structured for them. They don't have to do that kind of getting going, that initiation that we talked about last week, because it's all there and planned for them.
So we sort of touched on a little bit when we received this question. We did have a bit of a conversation beforehand because I think think about some ideas and stuff like that. So looking in terms of gaming, sometimes we don't want them, or even sort of screen time in terms of watching TV, we don't want to completely remove that potentially. And I know some families make the decision to not have screen time, but some families also find the child enjoys it. So we were looking about things, actually, what can you do as well as the screen time? So one thing that we've sort of jotted down is maybe sort of creating an activity box. So Pinterest is always, I love Pinterest, best place to go. And they tend to have lots of ideas, but the idea of an activity box is it's somewhere that your child can go, they can root through, and they can find activities that they can do that are basically pre-planned for them. So if you want to go into really sort of make it quite detailed, you can have different timed activities. So you might have different colours for different times, so 5 minute, 10 minute, half an hour. You then also have sort of pictures on them of the activities. So rather than just having play Lego, you might have 4 or 5 cards of different Lego things that they can create. So build a car, build a castle. Again, with drawing, draw a picture of our family, draw a picture of our home, things like that. So you're trying to give them as much detail of what the activity is going to entail rather than them trying to come up with their own idea.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily have to follow exactly what's on the card, but you are sparking that initial idea. So you might have put down, oh, can you build a castle? Saying they go, oh, well, I don't want to build a castle. Actually, I'm going to have a go at building a dragon because that's more within my kind of like interest. So you're just giving that opportunity to spark that. And if they can't think of anything, they do have those cards to fall back on.
It leads on quite nicely because the other thing we suggested is supporting with that task initiation. Now, we do have an episode coming up, I believe it's our next episode on task initiation, but just briefly sort of supporting them and getting started on that task. So whether it is just supporting them initially with the ideas for the game, if it's sort of more activity-based games, so hide and seek, tag, or anything like that, just getting them started and supporting them into getting into that activity.
Absolutely. And I think we've had a lot of people come in and go, well, yeah, That's great. I want to get them started, but I'm trying to cook tea. And they they can't wait for that kind of, and they automatically defer back to that screen time. So mum and dad aren't available. Can I watch TV? Can I go on my iPad? That sort of thing. And if you're trying to move away from that screen time, like our question asks, like why are they always seeking it? What you can do is create this waiting dice. So like a blank copy of a cube, and you can put down the activity box as one side of it. You could put down doing some like sensory activities. So you could do like, oh, go and do 10 star jumps, or go on the trampoline, or something like that. And you fill out the whole of this dice, and whilst they're waiting for you to be ready because you're absolutely in the middle of something, you can't stop, they could have a go at rolling this dice. And again, it gives them those ideas that don't just directly relate to screen time.
And I think something that pops into my mind is I feel like the fear of actually how long am I going to have to continue to do these little things to ensure that my child or young person is able to sort of do things on their own.
Yeah.
And I always, especially when I'm speaking to parents, say, when you start doing these little things, you're aiding in building those skills and building that ability to be more independent. That actually, as the child develops and grows, or the teen or whatever, you give them more strategies, which aids them in that ability to get going. So it might feel in the initial sort of starting of these things, oh, I'm doing so much, I'm so worried that they're not being independent. But actually, the more and more skills you give them.
There's a child psychologist called Vygotsky who came up with this thing called zone of proximal development, and it's all about scaffolding your child. So what your child can do independently versus what they can do scaffolded to push them onto that achieving. And that's kind of what you're doing with all of these little hints and tips that we're suggesting, or things that you're doing by yourself. You're doing that scaffolding element to be able to then take that away so they can achieve further.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that we put down was screen time rules. So these might be, if you don't like the terminology rules, you could do boundaries or screen time activities, whatever works for your family. But these are just things that you decide as a family that need to get done before going and using a screen. So it might be as simple as, like Abby said, doing some sensory activities because actually they've just come home from school, they need to do a bit of regulation before they sit down. So is it that you do sort of some regulation activities, so vestibular, so movement, proprioceptive, pressure, just before they sit down and do screen time? Again, for those olders, it might be getting them started on their homework and quantifying, okay, you've got to do 5 questions or 5 pages of reading, and then we go on to screen time. So they don't have to be extensive, but it just puts a delay before they get started on that screen time.
Because I mean, there's a lot of screen time that, it gets a bad rep, screen time.
Yeah.
But there are lots of beneficials to screen time, like there's loads of games and but learning games. So I think it's entirely dependent on the family. But if that was something that you were thinking about and you wanted to try and regulate that screen time a little bit further, that's something that you could put in place.
Yeah, definitely. So our next question was, what's the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum? So we did look into, again, going back to a couple of episodes ago, look into emotional control and the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So if you did want to sort of go backwards, if you've been with us the whole time, thank you for staying.
Thank you.
But if not, and this is the first episode you're listening to, do go back and listen to our first couple of episodes because we go a little bit more into this. But in terms of the difference between the two of them, now my understanding of a tantrum is more around sort of the child wanting a reaction, wanting to get something. There has to be an outcome to the reason for their upset. So I don't know, it might be a chocolate bar in the supermarket, it might be something bigger. Whereas a meltdown tends to be more, there's not a want for a reaction or an item. And if actually they receive that item,
the behaviour's not going to go away.
No, it still continues. So it's considering sort of what potentially is that trigger point that's caused them to start sort of this emotional outburst as such. And I think we often talk a lot about, don't we, in terms of a emotional response or outcome, that sort of thing, because I think the term sort of tantrum and things like that get a little bit misconstrued.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you said, Nat, it's the difference between the child looking for a reaction or whether they're not even giving you eye contact and they're kind of retreating, or they're having that meltdown and they're not looking for an adult, they're not looking for anyone, they've gone into that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, and they cannot control their behaviour at this point.
I think another thing to look at as well is the communication side of things. So, are they actually being able to effectively communicate what they're wanting or what their needs are? Or actually, are they struggling to communicate that right now? Because if they're struggling to communicate, they've gone into that Dan Siegel flipping the lid, so executive functioning's disengaged, they have no logical reasoning, and actually they're struggling to communicate because they don't know the causation of what they're feeling. However, more likely in sort of the tantrum realms, they are still able to communicate what they want and what they need, and sometimes that can be quite a good defining of the two.
It is very good. I mean, an example, yesterday my little boy decided that he wanted to go to the shops and very sweetly wrote a shopping list and everything, but it was bedtime at that point. And he had a tantrum because at points he would stop, he would look at his dad and I and be like, are we going to the shops? And then carry on with the behaviour, and actually turned around dead in the eye to me and went, if you don't let me go to the shops, this emotion is going to continue. That was him in full-blown tantrum mode, and that was quite an easy one to distinguish between. And I think if you've got a child who does struggle with communication, those lines can be quite blurred. So it is tricky, and it's looking at what was the cause of the behaviour. Is it something that you know is a trigger for them, or is it because you've had that no in place, or, things like that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also sort of sometimes to think about the arc of a meltdown as well, because that can be quite handy, because sometimes we can find as well that the day seems to be going that we keep hitting this arc of, well, I thought we were calmed down from previous, and then we're up again, and then we're up again. And it's thinking actually in terms of the time that they've had to regulate, and have they actually been able, say we've gone to a shopping centre and they have felt sensory overwhelm and that has caused a meltdown, and then you got home and you're thinking, okay, fine, we're out of that environment, but they've gone shot back up. Have they really had the time to regulate? Have they managed their sensory environment? And I think I was talking to a family the other day, and she was giving me some lovely examples of how she was validating her child's feelings because he was struggling with some noise outside, and he felt he was going, it was too noisy, and she was helping him understand what noises were around him. She was saying, is it the TV? And he said no. She said, okay, we'll turn the TV off. So helping him eliminate those things, because again, it's that executive function. They can't plan and organise at that point. So hopefully those were helpful answers for everyone. We're just about to step into having our wonderful guest join us, Chelsea. She will introduce herself and let us know a little bit about her. Welcome, Chelsea, to the Sensational Life with Bibic podcast. So lovely to have you. Could you let all our listeners know what you do here at Bibic and how long you've been here?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I've been really excited about this podcast. I am Chelsea. I am the head of therapy and business development. So I lead the therapy team alongside 2 senior therapists, and I look at all the different ways to develop our services and enhance them for parents and make them work for the parents, and whilst also making them work for the charity as well.
How long have you worked for Bibic then?
So I've worked here for 7 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It's a long time. So today we're going to be talking about organisation. And that is kind of like the ability to keep track of things mentally and physically. And when we think about who's good at organisation and who's not, it's those who aren't are the ones who leave items of like their bags. They come in from school, bags on the floor, shoes in a different place, coats not on the hook, kind of everywhere. They can't organise themselves in that respect. And it kind of links back to that kind of task initiation and not being able to get things ready and organised to do an activity, even something that they want to do. So I think today is going to be really key to think about kind of what strategies you can put in place to organise yourselves, because I think we know everyone. I was going to say there's lots of people who aren't organised.
No, I was going to say Chelsea's probably the best person for this because you help organise the whole team and get us going and everything like that. So what do you think, if you could give anyone some sort of key tips on organisation, where do you think you would start? Thinking from sort of a child's perspective, what would you do? What advice would you give a parent in terms of organisation?
Calendars and alarms.
Yeah.
So Amazon Alexa or any sort of smart speaker, or even just like reminders that pop up on your phone or things like that. They're amazing because they just help keep you organised and keep track of the day. And visual calendars are always amazing. So I know I couldn't live without my calendar, and so many reminders popping up on my phone. I don't think I'd know what day of the week it was or what I was doing at all if I didn't have that.
That's actually a really good tip for the older ones as well, because quite often you find a lot of teens are very attached to their phones. So having everything on their phone, using their phone calendars.
And it literally just comes up a notification. I'm like, oh yeah, I was meant to do that. But then I suppose if you're transferring that to children, so having that on the fridge so they can see what they're doing and they can predict what's coming up, having those prompts for organisation. So if you've got PE next day, like draw a little picture of the PE bag so they don't forget it. Things like that, I would say, for day to day to keep track of things.
Yeah, that's really good tips and things. I suppose with the smart speaker as well, you've got the fact that it's a third party reminding and organising, not the parents.
Well, it stops the parents from nagging, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No one likes to nag and no one likes to be nagged, so it just stops all of that. So it's an Alexa can get it in a neck for nagging.
Yeah, shout at Alexa all you like. She's not going to argue back. And so, I'm just trying to think of other bits and pieces that they may struggle with. So that's going to really help with kind of the elements of forgetting homework or forgetting PE kits and things like that. What about, I'm just thinking, again, going back to my little boy, I've mentioned him a couple of times already, but getting dressed in the morning and you go, and your sock, and your other sock, and he cannot organise himself to kind of get dressed.
I quite like the idea. I saw once, and I think a parent actually did this and it's really useful, is they have a picture of the child and then it's like flaps of clothing. Oh. So they have to turn the flaps, so one flap would be a sock, so they put the sock on. So they turn the flaps as they do it themselves.
Yeah.
So then once the picture of them is dressed, then they'll be dressed.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Yeah, and I think also potentially using an actual picture of the child themselves, because I think sometimes as well with sort of an element of literal interpretation, sometimes using illustrations can be difficult. So actually maybe using a picture, because a lot of the times you probably find it's school uniform that's the hardest thing to get them to dressed in.
Always,
so whereas weekends are far, far easier. So maybe actually having a picture of the child themselves and then an item of their clothing. So actually then they can link that to them actually wearing it. So I quite like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And boxes, labelled boxes for stuff.
Out of sight, out of mind, always. And sometimes when you sort of label boxes, you can see. Yeah. So having things on view for them as well.
I saw another one, and I got to blame. I think it was Pinterest for this one.
But we've gone into Pinterest already. So.
But a stare box with each child's name on it.
Love that.
So if the stuff is in the box, it means it's got to go upstairs.
Love that idea.
Like that idea.
I feel with organisation, it's always one of those big topics because I feel like every single person in life struggles with organisation. And I think it's one of those things that, like we were saying previously, when we're helping children with organisation and putting all these strategies in, I think I've already said it, it's sort of just giving those strategies to get them started. And I think it's not being fearful that you have to keep changing those strategies. Because I think some people think that one organisation technique will work and that will be it. Whereas I know I've gone from diaries to phone to, I think I use an online one with Microsoft and things like that. So it's not worrying that you're having to change up those organisation techniques.
And what works for one person is not going to work for the next person. So I know that me particularly, I'm very list heavy.
Yeah.
That's how I like to organise myself, what I need to do, what I need to get. I like to make a list and mark it off because I'm really sad and like to put things on that I've already done so I can tick them off.
That's a reward.
That is my reward. Yeah, that's true. But I know that system doesn't work for everyone.
Especially children with autism or children with ADHD, specifically ADHD, because I've come across it so many times, is the hyperfocus or the hyperfixation of that specific organisational technique loses its hyperfixation.
Mm-hmm. It loses its dopamine, doesn't it?
It loses its dopamine, and it's it doesn't work anymore. So then you've got to choose a new one.
Yeah.
But I always just keep things in rotation. Mm-hmm. So you just have a list of stuff, organisational tips.
So it'll come back round.
Yeah, you just keep going round and round and round because even though it's old, if it's been like a few months since you last used it, dopamine comes back again.
And I think this is a thing, isn't it? All these terms come under that umbrella of executive functioning, and without sort of organisation techniques, we're going to support the development of our executive functioning. And actually, as adults, we still, every person I can imagine puts their own strategies in. I know, remembering doctor's appointment, you have to put it somewhere. So actually, if we're having to put extra things in for our younger children, I think we touched on it, didn't we, that there's a potential of 3 to 5 years delay in their executive functioning, especially in terms of ADHD, because they've done that research. And again, when we say delay, it's not development, it's just effectiveness. And actually, it might be for the moment they just need that extra bit of organisation in there, but actually, as they grow and develop, that developmental gap gets smaller. So you think a 30-year-old being compared to a 25-year-old, there's not a lot in it. It's just when they're younger.
That there seems like this very wide gap, but they will get there. And like we've said before, with that scaffolding element of it, you're just supporting them in the meantime, and it will not be forever.
Yeah, exactly. So Chelsea, do you have any more tips or insight when it comes to organisation? Anything that you personally use within your day-to-day life? Because I feel like you probably in your role do quite a lot.
I know if it's specifically for like older children, there's a lot of apps out there now that help to organise a lot of things. Even for like motivation and to keep you going, that, you know, because with organisation, a lot of procrastination can go on.
We have touched on task paralysis. Yeah, we've done that one.
So looking at kind of those sorts of apps where I know there's ones where you can grow a tree. So like, but if you pick up your phone or do something else or deviate away from what you're doing, the tree dies. And it's like, so it's that motivation that just keeps you going. So like, oh, I need to get this tree fully grown before I can stop. Or is it the Finch app that helps build new habits and things like that? And of course, like this you have a little penguin, and the penguin grows as you like start to embed that sort of that habit and things like that. So I think, you know, little apps like that can be really, really handy, because it kind of, again, it's fun, it's lighthearted, it's not like a fixed rule thing, and it's kind of just, I think the more fun people can make it and the less pressure put on it, I think is like one of the biggest things. I think with anything, you know, if there's a task that a child won't do, if there's something that a child keeps forgetting, I think the more pressure and like that kind of pressure on themselves and the pressure on the child, it builds that anxiety, and then, you know, or you just forget anyway, or you start getting behaviour. So I think making it fun, I think everything, if you make it fun, then it makes it motivating. Fun equals motivation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining our podcast.
It was amazing having you on.
Lovely. Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so that was our lovely guest speaker, Chelsea. I hope you found her little hints and tips very helpful for you. Just to give an overview kind of about that organisation side of things, it's quite a fundamental part of executive function. We all need to have those organisational skills in our day-to-day lives. As we touched on and Chelsea touched on, it is different for absolutely everyone. So what works for one person is not going to work for another person. And it's really important, particularly with the younger ones, to try and keep that fun side of things up, because fun equals motivation.
Oh, that was lovely what she said.
I know, I love that.
That's great, wasn't it? Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that it falls under that umbrella of executive function. And I think, again, we've touched on it quite a lot, and I think I've said it quite a lot, but I feel like you have to keep saying it, because there shouldn't be any worry in terms of the extra things we're having to put in for these individuals, because like I said, there are those potential struggles, and it's all based on needs, isn't it? It's sort of what are their needs and what do they need right at this moment, and that doesn't mean that they're going to need this forever, because actually everything you're putting in now is helping them as they grow and sort of learn these strategies that actually we often have a lot of sort of our teens come in and they don't quite realise it, but they've already come up with their own strategies, and it's just finding those strategies that work for them, but just maybe tailoring them a little bit to be a bit more effective and work a little bit better for them.
Yeah, and executive function, I'm sure we mentioned it in one of our first episodes, but it is still developing until the age of 25. So the fact that, you know, we're having to support young teens and adults although they might be having slightly more difficulty with it, it's still something that everyone needs support with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I think that's it for this episode.
It is. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Yeah, so don't forget to comment, leave us a review. Do follow us on social media because we're trying to sort of give you updates on the podcast, and we're always looking forward to sort of your questions and your stories. So make sure you sort of head over there if you want any more information, or you just want to sort of drop us a message. Do feel free to do that.
Yeah. And as a last little note, as we've mentioned him quite a lot, here's my son.
Keep it sensational.